Hey, welcome to Liberal Lunch. Beautiful summer day. We're having a great summer here in Toronto. It's a little hot sometimes, but that's okay. It's summer.
Hot's
What do you
good.
want? Pretty soon we'll be complaining about the cold. So,
Sun is shining. It's beautiful out.
It is beautiful. Last night I actually rode my bike all the way from Mississauga. Like at night, it was great.
So
With
great.
the wind at my back. It was just a beautiful night out there. But we're here very happy to have Eric Gilboord back on the show. Eric, great to see you again.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here.
Hi, Eric.
Now, we were just saying, because Tesla, you guys haven't met before, but you're the, well, your company is warrenbdc.com
Right.
is the website, and that helps companies get ready to sell or transition to new owners.
Right.
And but you also have another career related as a speaker.
Yes.
And so I guess we're interested in what kind of things you speak about and who should think about getting you to come and speak in front of them.
Okay, that's a great question. Thank you. Great opening. Basically, there's two audiences that I speak to. Naturally, there would be the audience of business owners, owner-operators who are thinking about exiting, thinking about their transition. And so if you were a company that had business owners as clients, and some of them were at that stage where they were starting to think about transition, you might want to bring me in as a speaker to talk to them and deliver a message that they really need to get started now. Get the conversation going now. That's what I'm really good at, is getting the audience to understand that they need to start thinking about the whole transition. It's not going to happen at the snap of their fingers. It's going to take a while. There's a lot of work involved, and it would be in your best interest, depending on what service you provide, to have those folks get going on that road to transition.
So I guess that would be, perhaps, I'm just trying to think, these would be maybe accountants or accounting firms
Could
that
be,
have
sure, could be
clients.
accounting firms, could be lawyers, could be financial advisors, wealth management folks, could be the bank. And it's interesting because that's the other audience that I talk to. The first one is the actual owners of the company. What we're finding is that we're getting a lot of interest from the financial institutions and the folks who are, quote-unquote, trusted advisors to the owners, because they're having a great deal of difficulty understanding what exactly is going on inside the head of the owner. It's not a simple black or white, I'm going to sell, I'm not going to sell. There's a lot of resistance, confusion, emotion wrapped up in the whole concept of transitioning. You've been working in a company that you started 30, 40 years ago, and now all of a sudden you're at the end of the road. So, what we can do is we can help the trusted advisors, financial advisors and accountants and folks that deal with these business owners, help them, again, get the conversation going, but they can start the conversation on their side of the table.
Well, it helps the financial institutions or whatever to stay really focused on what they do well and transition you in. It sounds like what you're really doing is like a big sort of succession plan. It's like doing a will.
Well, it is.
Yeah.
It is like a succession.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's all the aspects to it. There's many, many things that are involved. And, as a trusted advisor, you might be involved in the financial side from a accounting perspective for the company. It might be personal accounting. A lawyer might be involved because of the company and your own personal, legal issues. There's all kinds of folks that are involved in this. You need a team of people, if you're an owner, in order to make this happen successfully. You can't do it on your own. You can't do it with one or two people helping. But the biggest challenge is getting the conversation started, getting the owners going. And from my conversations with banks and financial advisors and all the organizations that are dealing with these owners, they're having difficulty communicating. They're having difficulty getting the owners to speak to them, and they're having difficulty understanding what's holding the owners back from moving forward. I mean, typically a trusted advisor will, talk to an owner and say, well, why aren't you thinking about selling? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Without really understanding the issues that are going on in their head. When we meet with new owners, it's 80% emotional, the conversation.
The attachment, for sure.
Dealing with the business and dealing with the business issues or increasing the value of the company, sure, you're going to get to that sooner than later, and probably within a couple of meetings. But initially, a lot of the conversation is about the emotion. What's going to happen to the company? What's going to happen to my employees? I thought my kids would take over the business, but now I find out they're not going to take it over. There's so many different issues that come up. And in fact, the owners are looking for help. They're looking for someone to provide them some guidance. And it's not just financial issues or legal issues. There's many, many other things that they need help with.
So would you say beyond the speaking engagements, you provide a real consultative, counseling type, hand-holding role for, engaging the conversation and then, really working with the owner to transition them?
Sometimes I feel like a family therapist.
Right, yeah, for sure, for sure.
Because they're a lot of times they're dealing with family issues. They're dealing with, as I said, kids in the business or not in the business. There's the blood family, and then there's the work family, and so they're dealing with two different kinds of families. And frankly, if you've had a company for 35 years and you have some employees that have been with you for 20, 25, 30 years, they've been instrumental in helping you become successful. You feel, an emotional attachment, as you should, to those folks, and you want to do right by them.
For sure.
But you don't always know what to do, because it's interesting. What owners are going through is likely the single most important sale they're ever going to make within their company, and the one that they're the least prepared for.
It kind of, and it also sounds like, they do have already a set of trusted advisors, whether it's accountants, lawyers, bankers, whatever. But those trusted advisors don't necessarily have the specific skill set to get them really thinking about transitioning the business. So maybe they're talking to their accountant or their lawyer about, I'm thinking of transitioning out of the business, I need an exit strategy, but they don't have the same skill set that you bring to the table. So this is why you're going in and speaking at these trusted advisors.
Absolutely. I mean, it happens a lot. A couple of years ago, I would say to an owner, I realize that you have a lawyer, you have an accountant, they've been with you for probably 10 or 20 or 30 years, but, you need to ask yourself the question, do they have experience with selling companies? And, it used to be a couple of years ago where I would say that, and I would suggest to the owner that you might want to look for other advisors who have experience selling businesses, and they'd seem a little bit surprised. Now, because there's so much conversation going on within the business community about transition, when you ask an owner today, do you realize that you're likely going to have to find someone else with more experience? They quickly look at me and they say, yeah, we realize that. We understand that. We know that while our advisors have been great up to this point, they may not necessarily be the right people to help us continue down this final part of the path to transition. And one of the reasons why advisors, want to hear basically what I have to say, what our company has to say, is because they want the seat at the table. I mean, this is a huge opportunity to be involved in probably, as I said, the single biggest, decision that an owner is ever going to make about the business. And if you're not there with the right information, or at least you know where to get the right information, you may not earn a seat at the table. And what may happen is that this whole transition may happen around you.
Oh, for
but
sure.
You won't necessarily be involved in
You're
it.
talking about the trusted advisor?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
trusted
Not
advisor. Yeah,
At the table.
for sure.
A seat at the table where there is ongoing conversation about the transition of the company. And if you don't bring anything fresh or new or
Of value.
of value to the table in terms of transition, they don't need you taking up a seat at the table.
Right.
But if you can bring things to the table, and it may not be your own experience, it may just be that you have associates that you can bring to the table that provide real value to the owner
100%.
at this important time.
That's
so you
where you
earn
come
the
in.
seat at the table.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
We're kind of like a quarterback almost, where some of the team are folks that you've been working with for a long time, your own trusted advisors. Some of them may be trusted advisors that we introduce into the mix, and then we act kind of like a quarterback for the team. to take care of all the issues that have to do with succession.
You know, the other thing that it kind of reminds me of is, I don't know if, or when the last time you've done this, Eric, but, you know, where I've been moving a household,
Right.
for example, which is a similar type of, it's the end of an era kind of thing.
Yeah.
If you're doing it yourself, it just takes so long because you're looking at the thing and you got to pick it up and take it to the truck, but you're thinking, you're just so invested, you just don't get around to just picking it up and moving it to the truck. Whereas if you get professional movers, they'll have the whole thing done in a
Yeah.
few hours, where it could take you days because you just got so much emotional involvement with every aspect
You're
of
making
it.
so many small decisions that add up to one really large decision. And if you can have someone that you can offload some of those decisions, or at the very least provide you relevant advice to help you make the correct decision. Because if you try to make these kinds of decisions on your own, you can end up, you know, and I've seen it happen, people can end up, sell the business for $2 million and they end up writing a check to the government for $1 million. Because they had bad advice.
Right. You definitely need the right types of detached individuals
Yes.
to help you to stay more dispassionate about all of the decision making throughout the process. You know, this is really interesting what you're saying, because what is it, like 70% of Canadian businesses are small, like family-owned businesses, right? Isn't that what the ratio
More like
is?
95%.
Okay, there you go. See,
But
I was
the-
being
but-
I was being conservative.
But the other interesting statistic is that 65% of established companies in this country are owned by boomers, which is the seniors, which is folks that are
Looking to
50 plus,
transition now.
50 plus years old.
Yeah, for sure.
So 2 out of 3 companies out there is owned and operated by someone who is likely looking to get out of the business.
And hasn't thought really robustly around a succession
They've
plan.
waited to the last minute.
Well, you
Of
don't
course.
really think about it. I mean,
You
usually
don't wanna think about
you're
it.
in the early days, you're busy building the business.
Exactly.
And then the rest of the time you're busy running the business, and you don't really think even that you're going to
Need to
exit
retire
out of that
or
someday.
want to.
You don't even
Yeah.
think about that, and then one
Yeah.
day you go, you know what?
I'm done.
Yeah, I want to get out of this, and
Uh-huh.
then you don't want to be in a situation where it's too late.
Sometimes you find out that there are other forces of nature that make the decision for you that you
Oh,
need
yeah.
to get out. So you may have personal health issues. You may have a spouse that has health issues. You may find that, and it's not unusual, that somebody who's in this 55, 60, 65-year range has a parent that they have to deal with. And we have been in situations where, you know, we've been moving along the road of transition with an owner, and what we find is that they say, well, you know what, I'm going to have to put this on hold for 3 months or 6 months or a year because I have to get my mother settled.
Right.
And, you know, these outside forces come to bear, and it could be that, I don't know, you have a bad knee or a bad hip or something, and there's always something out there, or you finally sit down as an owner with your kids and say, well, I'm thinking about, you know, the transition, and I'm planning on you guys taking over the business, and all of a sudden you realize that, sorry, Dad, or Mom, we're not interested in the business. We have our own lives, we have our own careers, but, you know, my plan was that you were going to take over the company. That's what I always thought, and it's, sorry, it's not going to happen.
This is
Now what do
happening
you
in
do?
so many areas of. It's just that in large organizations, in corporate organizations, they build this in to replace, you know, CEOs and
Yeah, you'd
executive
think
staff.
they do.
Yeah, I mean, they're a little bit more diligent about it than, say, some of the smaller organizations, at least the companies that I've worked for. But this is happening in all areas.
I
You
can
know,
show
I look
you-
at clinical.
Yeah.
I'm in the clinical sphere,
Okay.
and doctors over the age of 50
Mm-hmm.
looking to sell their robust practices. Like everybody's having the same this challenge because the boomers represent 65% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big deal.
Oh, it's absolutely, and everyone thought that this would happen on its own. Everyone thought that people would retire at 55 and go play golf for the rest of their life. And, you know, it's interesting. There's a fundamental difference between people who grew up in the corporate world, I believe, and people who grew up owning and operating their own companies.
For sure.
And, you know, the idea of an owner-operator who spent decades running and growing a company and shutting off and all of a sudden going and playing golf for the rest of their lives. Not going to happen. It just won't happen. In fact, what's happening is that people who have sold their companies, they've taken some time off, maybe 6 months or a year, maybe at the outside 2 years. They've traveled, they played golf. You know, you get to a point where enough is enough. And what they're doing is they're buying smaller companies. They're getting together with their buddies and buying 2 or 3 $3 million companies. And so they're putting it together, making it 10 million, growing that to maybe a 20 or $30 million company, and then selling. They want the action. They want the excitement. And it's interesting, one of the challenges that owners have is they think that if they sell the company that they're going to basically drop dead the next day because they don't know what they're going to do with themselves. And the truth is there's tons of options, including what I just said about, you know, buying companies and getting involved in companies in whatever capacity that you want.
Well, also I think that there's a great opportunity there too for some of these people transitioning out of their businesses to mentor younger entrepreneurs and you know, younger businesses to be successful.
And it's interesting, and a lot of folks do that, or a lot of folks attempt to do it. A lot of people that have, at least the folks that I've talked to, that have run and sold 5, 10, 15, 20, $30 million companies, it can be a little bit frustrating when you're dealing with startups or you're dealing with younger folks, because there's so many things that you know that need to be done. There's so many things that you know and so many ways that you could avoid certain mistakes, but you know, you can't always have somebody do what's best for themselves. And so what we're finding is that sometimes it becomes a bit of a frustration from a mentoring standpoint, not always, but sometimes, and that's where they turn to just buying a company. Because it's easier just to buy the company.
And then building the infrastructure.
They make sure that there's a management team is in place. They make sure that they give the management team everything they need to grow that business, to make it better. These are folks that are buying into companies, and they're not looking for another full-time job. That's absolutely not what they're looking for. And they're not necessarily looking to make a huge amount of money. They're looking for the excitement. They're looking for the fun. They're looking to be involved. They're looking to do some good. You know, they're looking to grow some companies, to make a better environment for the employees. They're looking to do a lot of positive things. And as I said, you know, money and having the final word isn't necessarily the end-all and be-all of the experience, but they also don't necessarily want to be in a position where, as I said, they know what needs to be done and it's just not getting done. They reserve the right to have kind of a final say. But they're not looking for full-time jobs. They're looking to basically mentor the company that they have most of the say in terms of final decisions.
Right.
So, Eric, I'm just wondering if you can kind of paint us a picture of what one of these speaking engagements might look like, whether maybe an example of an engagement you've had in the past.
Sure, absolutely. We just did one a couple weeks ago, and it was a room mostly full of CFOs, folks that were either working for the owner of a company as a CFO, senior financial position, or they might have clients that were owners and they were accountants and accounting firms, some financial advisors. There were some owners in the audience as well, but 2/3 of the audience, maybe 3/4 of the audience, were the trusted advisors that we're talking about. And they were quite surprised with many of the things that I was talking about, and their eyes were kind of open to, first of all, the opportunities, and you know, I started off the presentation with why they needed to be in the room, why they were really there, and they really took to that. And then, you know, we started talking about some of the statistics, and we started talking a little bit about some examples of cases of businesses and what's going on, what can go well, what can go poorly. And it was a really good evening. What I did was I had a list of 12 questions, and I handed the questions out to the audience, and I let the audience just ask the first question, then pass on the list, and then ask another question. And it was interesting because the first 4 questions that came to me as I was standing at the front of the room, I had no idea where they were coming from. Somehow the list got passed in amongst the audience, but people seem to enjoy that way of participating in the event.
Now, do you have
Wonderful.
anything coming up? Any speaking engagements?
None in the near future. We're booking booking a number of events for the fall. We're talking to a variety of financial institutions. There's some large accounting firms and banks and some financial advising firms that we're talking to about doing multiple dates, so doing basically tours across the city. And what we're doing is we're offering them an opportunity to book myself as the speaker and then get a quantity of my book to go with it so that everyone in the audience gets a quantity of the book. And in some cases, what we're actually talking about is that if it's an audience of trusted advisors, and they obviously, will have customers, clients that are business owners, then what we'll do is we'll not only provide a book for each of the members of the audience, but we'll provide them a small quantity, whatever they want, to hand out to their customers who are business owners, because as we said it, sort of all along, they need to get that conversation going.
Started.
And sometimes the best thing to do is either send someone an article or a blog post, and they can get a lot of that kind of material from warrenbdc.com or from ericgilboard.com, or they can simply order a copy or a quantity of my book and hand that book to the owner, and then just leave it alone. Let the owner read through the book. It's a pretty easy read. What the owner will find is that they are absolutely not alone. That, many, many owners out there have the same challenges that they do, and that, there is thinking that has been done on their behalf, and there are answers to questions. And in fact, there are answers to questions that they don't even know are questions, because what they'll find is that they don't know what they don't know, but the answers are out there. And it's like any endeavors. I like to say to owners, when you started the company or when you took over the business, I haven't met anyone yet where everything worked out perfectly, nor have I met anyone who knew exactly what they were going to do with the business. There was always a series of trial and error and learning, and that's part of what's going to happen during this whole transition phase. Is you're going to try some things, you're going to get advice. Some advice is going to be good, some may not be, depending on where you get it from, but you're going to go through a learning curve, and a pretty steep learning curve. And remember, that oftentimes, 20% of your wealth is what your financial advisor takes care of for you. But 80% of your wealth, if you're an owner, is wrapped up in the business.
And your people. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wrapped up in the company.
Sure.
So you may be sitting on, let's call it $2 million, and that's kind of what you have invested right now, for your future years, for your legacy. On the other hand, there may be another $8 million that will come to you once you sell the business. I mean, that's a whole other world of responsibility, and so you need to make sure that you have good people with you.
So maybe you should just mention the title of the book again.
The title of the book is Moving Forward, Get the Triple Effect, which is basically about selling your business for 3 times more and 3 times faster. And you can take a $5 million company and you can make it a $10 or $15 million company, or you can take a company that has $1 million in EBITDA, which is a figure that's used to determine the value of the company. And it isn't always about increasing the sales dramatically. It may just be about increasing the value of the business, the way the business runs, and increasing the EBITDA from 1 million, for example, to 3 million. Now, all of a sudden, your company is worth a lot more than it was before. I tend to look at small and medium-sized business. Sometimes owners treat it like they have a Ferrari, but they drive it to the store for milk, because there's always unrealized potential within the company that owners tend to overlook or don't think about or don't do anything about. And so there's lots of ways that you could go in and easily increase the value of the business. It's not always about fixing mistakes, because you could have a well-run company.
Yeah, it's just tapping
It's
potential.
and the potential that's just been sitting there waiting
Right.
to be tapped into.
And it's good to have that new set of eyes just come in and take a look at the picture.
Fresh eyes are a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Okay. So, great, Eric. Now, what's the best way for people that may want to bring you in to speak to their people? What's the best way?
I would suggest they go to ericgilboard.com and just fill out a contact form or give us a call. There's videos on the site and content, descriptions of the various presentations that we do, and so all the basic information that they're looking for will be right there.
And of course, they can also go to your company website, warrenbdc.com.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Wonderful.
Great. Thanks for coming in again.
Thank you for having me again. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eric.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to take a little break, me and Tesla. And then we're going to come back. We got lots more great stuff coming up, some blockchain-related
Yay.
things today. So it's going to be great. We'll
Full
be
day.
back in a few minutes here on thatchannel.com.